There was a night somewhere in the long, unmarked stretch of your life when the boundary between waking and sleeping felt thinner than usual, a night that doesn't belong to any specific age or memory, a night that could have happened when you were small, or when you were grown, or in any of the years that folded quietly between, because it wasn't tied to time, only to a sensation that stayed with you in a way no clear memory ever could. You were drifting toward sleep, that slow, sinking motion where thoughts soften around the edges and the mind begins loosening its grip on the day, where nothing is fully real, but nothing has fully faded either. And in that gentle descent, so subtle you might have missed it, if the dream hadn't held you so softly, you felt a presence beside you, unannounced, unforced, and strangely familiar in a way you couldn't explain, even if someone asked you in that very moment what you were feeling. It didn't startle you. It didn't jolt your breath or raise your pulse. It didn't bring the cold kind of attention that fear carries. Instead, it arrived like a warmth you didn't realize had been missing until it returned, the kind of warmth that settles into your awareness the way a blanket settles over a resting body, quiet and certain, as if it had always been there, waiting for you to notice it again. You didn't see anything. Dreams don't begin with sight. They begin with impressions, those soft, preformed sensations that hover between thought and instinct, the ones that reach you before the dream decides to paint its shapes and shadows. And in that first moment, before the dream knew what it wanted to show you, you sensed movement beside you, not loud, not distinct, not shaped, just there, close enough to be undeniable and gentle enough to be comforting. It felt like someone was walking with you, even though you couldn't remember taking any steps. It felt like someone was matching your breathing, even though you hadn't yet noticed your breath. It felt like someone had been part of the moment long before you arrived in it. You didn't turn your head. The dream wouldn't have let you, and even if it had, you wouldn't have felt the urge. Dreams decide when you're ready to see something, and that night, it wanted you to feel first, to understand the presence before assigning it any form. And what you felt was calm. Not ordinary calm, not the surface-level quiet of lying awake in the dark, but a deeper calm that seemed to settle inside your chest. A calm that didn't come from being alone, but from being accompanied in a way that required nothing from you. No explanation, no recognition, no effort. You didn't know who they were. You didn't ask. Dreams don't invite questions. They invite acceptance. And you accepted the presence the way one accepts an old memory returning without warning, softly, without resistance, without needing to reason through it. The space around you didn't have features. There were no walls, no sky, no floor you can confidently describe. Only a vague sense of direction, a sense that you were moving or being moved or drifting forward in a way that felt both purposeful and effortless. The presence beside you fit into that motion perfectly. Not ahead, not behind, not distant. Right beside you, parallel, aligned. Like a second awareness overlapping yours just enough to be felt, but not enough to take form. You sensed them in the quiet fact of their nearness. In the soft way the dream seemed to make room for two instead of one. In the steady, comforting rhythm of a companionship that didn't need a face or a name. There was something familiar in that rhythm, something you recognized not from memory, but from that old instinctive part of you that remembers what the mind forgets. It felt like this wasn't the first time, as if they had walked with you in countless dreams before this one. Dreams you no longer remember, dreams that dissolved as soon as morning touched them. But your body remembered the feeling. Your breathing remembered the synchronization. Your awareness remembered the way softness expands when you're not alone in the dark. That familiarity wasn't sharp or clear. It was warm, like a faded imprint, like the echo of footsteps that match your own, like a voice you don't recognize but somehow trust. And in that dreamy space that wasn't really a space at all, the presence didn't shift or speak or announce itself. It simply remained, steady and quiet, letting its nearness be enough. There was no story yet, no direction, no revelation waiting behind the next breath. Just a shared moment in the earliest stage of a dream, where everything is fluid and undefined. And somehow, that undefined nature made the companionship feel even more real. You might try now, from the safety of waking thought, to place this moment somewhere, to imagine a landscape, a corridor, a path. But none of those details existed. What existed was the sensation of stepping into sleep with someone matching your pace. A pace that was slow and unhurried, the kind of pace that dreams love, steady enough to keep you drifting deeper, gentle enough to keep you from noticing the exact moment your awareness crossed into the dream entirely. And as that shift happened, so gradually you couldn't separate one moment from the next, you felt the presence settle beside you, as if acknowledging that you were fully with it now, as if this was the moment the dream had been waiting for, not for revelation, not for fear, not for surprise, for recognition. Not the kind of recognition that comes from memory, but the recognition that comes from the heart, from instinct, from that quiet truth sealed somewhere behind your breathing. The truth that whispers, you were not meant to enter this night alone. And with that awareness, the dream opened just a little more, enough for you to move deeper into it, enough for you to feel the world shifting into something quieter and darker and softer, enough for you to accept that whoever was beside you belonged to this moment just as much as you did. And as the last traces of waking dissolved from your mind, you didn't feel fear or confusion or doubt. You felt accompanied, held, matched. And with that feeling, the dream carried you inward, the presence staying at your side, with the kind of gentle certainty that required no explanation at all. There is a certain kind of dream you have lived through so many times that its feeling has become woven into you, and yet you can never describe it, never quite capture it, never hold it long enough for it to become a memory. Not because it fades too quickly, and not because it is strange, but because it has never relied on images or scenery or structure in the first place. It is a dream built from atmosphere, from the texture of your own mind, drifting inward, from that soft threshold where awareness begins to loosen and the world begins to blur. And that night, you were in exactly that kind of dream. It didn't begin with a place. It didn't place you in a room or a street or a field or any of the familiar shapes your waking mind tries to assign. It began the way certain dreams always begin, with a feeling of being somewhere without being able to say where, a sense of existing inside a space that responds not to physics, but to emotion, shifting gently with your breath, your thoughts, your forgetting. The dream was not a location, it was a condition, a state, an atmosphere that wrapped around you lightly, like a faint pressure against your mind rather than your body. You weren't walking, but you felt motion. You weren't still, but you felt steadiness. Reality was neither solid nor fluid. It simply existed in a soft, undecided way, like it was waiting to see what shape your drifting awareness wanted to give it. And yet, no matter how foggy the space was, there was something profoundly familiar about it. Not a memory exactly, but the echo of one. The sense that you had walked through this dream before, perhaps many times, even though you could never name a single detail from any of those journeys. It wasn't déjà vu, it was deeper than that. Déjà vu belongs to waking life. This belonged to the quiet part of your mind that recognizes the things you have forgotten, or the things that never needed to be remembered. The dream didn't sharpen. It didn't bring walls closer or push horizons back. It didn't pick a direction for you, nor did it ask you to choose one. Instead, the space around you expanded and contracted with your state of mind, opening when your thoughts softened, dimming when curiosity pressed too hard, shifting when your attention wavered. Each time you tried to pinpoint what the dream looked like, something delicate pulled away, as if the dream itself were saying, "You don't need to see to know." Your feet didn't touch anything solid, but there was the distinct impression of forwardness beneath you, a sense of moving through something that wasn't air, wasn't ground, wasn't anything the waking world has a name for. It was simply the dream's way of telling you that you were going somewhere without needing a destination. The silence wasn't empty. It was full in a way that silence rarely is, full of suggestion, full of subtle shifts, full of an unspoken hum that dreams often have when they are paying attention to you. Sometimes you might call it stillness, sometimes presence, sometimes nothing at all. But in that dream, it felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for you to settle deeper into it. What you remember now is not a scene, but a sensation. The feeling that the world around you had been made from soft thought instead of physical matter, that everything existed in a state of almost being, as if the dream were deliberately avoiding solidity, not to hide anything from you, but to make sure you didn't anchor yourself too firmly to a place you weren't meant to inspect. Dreams like this one are shy. When you observe too closely, they retreat. When you surrender to them, they open. That night, you surrendered, not intentionally, not consciously, but in that slow way people do when sleep pulls them beyond the reach of reason. And as you drifted deeper, you became aware of something else. The dream wasn't shaping itself around you alone. The space, the atmosphere, the sensation of movement, it all made room for more than one presence. That simple, quiet widening of the dream's atmosphere was the first subtle sign. The dream became wide enough for two. You felt a slight adjustment around your left side, or the idea of your left side. It's impossible to say which. Like the dream shifting weight to accommodate another awareness. It wasn't visual, it wasn't literal, it wasn't spatial in the waking sense. It was simply the sense that the dream expanded its boundaries, softened its edges, and allowed you to feel not just your own drifting, but the faint, silent drift of someone beside you. This sensation didn't bring clarity to the dream. It didn't sharpen the atmosphere. It didn't reveal a figure or a silhouette or anything shaped like a person. The dream remained as undefined as before, refusing to become a place, refusing to give you landmarks or structures to rely on. But it gave you this one truth, subtle and unmistakable. You were not the only one moving through whatever this dream space was. It was a companionship built entirely from impression, a kind of resonance you could feel but not see, a presence that matched your drifting with a drifting of its own, as if the two of you were floating through the same current of thought. No footsteps, no breathing, no shadows, just the undeniable knowledge that someone else was there, someone the dream already knew, someone the dream had been waiting to reintroduce to you. You tried, instinctively, quietly, to understand, to look toward them with the part of your mind that still remembered how vision was supposed to work. And immediately, the dream softened further, blurring whatever faint structure might have existed, keeping the presence hidden the way dreams always hide the things that matter most. Not out of fear, out of intention. Because this was not a dream meant to be seen. It was a dream meant to be felt. And you felt it clearly, the gentle, steady motion of someone beside you, a presence that didn't disturb the silence, but completed it, someone whose nearness made the dream feel fuller, softer, safer somehow, someone who walked with you the way a second thought accompanies the first, quietly, naturally, without needing to be acknowledged. This was the dream you could never fully recall, not because it was vague or forgettable, but because it existed outside the kind of memory that survives waking. It lived in the emotional layer beneath memory, where the mind stores experiences not as images, but as truths. And the truth of that dream was simple, unspoken, and impossible to deny. The moment the dream deepened, you were no longer walking through it alone. There is a certain kind of awareness that doesn't come from sight or sound or anything the waking mind would consider proof. It comes from somewhere quieter, somewhere deeper, somewhere that only opens when you are drifting far enough into sleep that the world you know has already loosened its grip on you. And that night, in that soft, undefined dream, that awareness reached you before anything else did. You felt someone beside you, not appearing, not approaching, not materializing out of any direction, just there, as naturally as your own shadow, as unforced as your own breath. The presence didn't arrive. It didn't enter the dream as a figure or shape. It didn't disturb the air or draw attention to itself. It existed in the way certain truths exist, quietly, steadily, without needing to be recognized, to be real. It felt as if the moment your mind stepped into that drifting state, the presence stepped with you, aligned with you, merging its rhythm with yours in a way that didn't call for questioning. You didn't turn toward it. You didn't even think to. Dreams rarely encourage the act of looking. They encourage the act of sensing, of accepting things without demanding detail. And what you sensed was a nearness, subtle but unmistakable, a faint warmth at the edge of your awareness that stayed with you the way a lingering thought might. It wasn't physical, yet it felt closer than touch. It wasn't visual, yet it felt clearer than sight. A presence that didn't need form to feel familiar. You didn't hear footsteps, but the softness beneath you felt shared. You didn't hear breathing, but your own breath began to settle into a rhythm that seemed to match something beyond you, slightly delayed, slightly mirrored, like two currents moving in the same direction, but not at exactly the same pace. The dream moved with that shared rhythm. When your thoughts softened, the presence felt nearer. When your attention lifted or wandered, the presence drifted with you, neither leading nor following, simply staying parallel in that strange, gentle way. Dreams understand companionship. Nothing about it asked for interpretation. Nothing asked for fear. The presence wasn't threatening, wasn't urgent, wasn't strange in the way nightmares are strange. It felt familiar in a deeper way, the way an old memory is familiar even when you forget what created it. You had felt this before, maybe not in this exact dream, but somewhere in other dreams you never remembered. A resonance that had echoed through more nights than you'd ever be able to count. A quiet alignment that your waking mind never bothered keeping, but your dreaming mind understood immediately. It felt like the presence had always walked beside you, always drifted with you through these soft, unformed dream layers, but only now were you calm enough to notice it. You tried, instinctively, softly, to give it shape in your mind, to imagine them as something, a figure, a shadow, a familiar outline. But dreams don't work that way. As soon as you reached for definition, the dream blurred it, pushing your attention back into the realm of sensation, where meaning is held without needing to be attached to form. The presence didn't sharpen, it didn't clarify, it didn't reveal, it simply stayed, unchanged, as if to say, I am not here to be seen, I am here to be felt. And that was enough. You felt no urge to assign identity, no urge to search for memory, no urge to ask, who are you? The absence of those questions was its own kind of understanding. The presence seemed to know you, your softness, your uncertainty, your drifting state, so well that speaking felt unnecessary. Even thinking felt unnecessary. There were no words exchanged, but something in the silence between you carried meaning. A kind of communication built from quiet synchronicity, like two thoughts belonging to the same mind. The dream made room for this closeness. The space around you shifted just slightly to accommodate the presence, widening in a way that wasn't physical but emotional. The atmosphere felt fuller, softer, steadier. The kind of steadiness you feel when someone sits with you in silence without needing anything from you. There was no weight in the air, no heaviness, just the soft impression that you were not navigating this dream alone. And the more you relaxed into it, the more natural the nearness felt. You might recall now that you tried, once or twice, to glance in their direction. Not with your eyes don't work the same way in dreams, but with your awareness, turning a kind of inner attention toward them. Each time, the dream responded by shifting the presence back into a gentle blur, not out of avoidance, but out of respect for the delicate balance the moment required. Dreams know when revealing too much will pull you awake. They know when clarity would disturb the softness you need to descend deeper. So they keep certain things hidden, not to frighten you, but to protect the calm the dream is building around you. The presence wasn't hidden out of fear. It was hidden out of purpose. It wasn't meant to be seen. It was meant to stay beside you without boundary. You didn't know what form it would have taken If dreams allowed form, you didn't need to know. The presence felt like something older than imagery, older than narrative, older than interpretation. A quiet companion that existed simply because your mind was willing to receive it. Its nearness felt almost like memory, but not a memory you could place in your life. A memory that belonged to your dreams themselves. The kind of impression that returns across different nights, different ages, different versions of you, carrying the same calm familiarity each time. It didn't feel like a stranger. It didn't feel like a friend either. It felt like something in between, something you've known without ever meeting, something that fits into the shape of your awareness the way a missing piece fits exactly into the space it left behind. That night, in that soft, unplaceable dream, the presence walked beside you with a steadiness that required no validation. It didn't drift away. It didn't waver. It simply stayed aligned with you, matching your descent into sleep with its own quiet motion. It was companionship without a face, connection without identity, a closeness that didn't need a name to exist. And as you moved deeper into that dream, as the world around you softened even further into something undefined and forgiving, the presence remained, your silent companion in a place where nothing else had to be real. And somehow that nearness felt truer than anything a waking face could have shown you. It was the kind of truth dreams understand better than daylight ever could. That some presences are felt, not seen. That some companionships don't belong to memory or logic, but to the quiet parts of sleep. And that night, the truth settled gently into you. Whatever this presence was, it belonged at your side. There is a rule in dreams that no one teaches you, yet everyone somehow understands. The deeper you drift, the less the dream wants you to see. Not because it is keeping secrets from you, but because sight is a waking sense, a sharp sense, a sense with edges, and dreams do not want edges. They want softness and nearness and sensations that move like water around your thoughts. And among all the things dreams soften, the first and easiest to blur is a face. The presence beside you that night had no face, not because it was dangerous or unfamiliar or meant to be feared, but because the dream was protecting itself from the weight of definition. A face is a story. A face is identity. A face demands recognition or interpretation or memory. And dreams know that the moment they give you a face, your mind will reach for logic, for explanations, for names, for meaning, and that grasping motion can pull you back toward waking. So the dream keeps the presence faceless, not to hide them from you, but to keep you inside the softness where you can drift without needing answers. You felt this truth long before you understood it. Every time you tried to turn toward the presence, something in the dream's fabric shifted, not abruptly, not as a warning, but as if gently guiding your attention away from clarity. The motion felt natural, like the way your eyes slide shut when light becomes too bright. It wasn't denial, it was comfort. The dream was telling you in its own quiet way. You don't need to see, you only need to feel. Faces belong to the world of daylight. Eyes, expressions, features, they all carry too much meaning, too many expectations. In dreams, meaning is carried differently. It flows through sensation, intuition, emotional temperature. You don't need a face to know someone is kind. You don't need eyes to know someone is near. You don't need features to know someone is walking in step with you. And in dreams, that knowing is more powerful than sight. The presence beside you wasn't blank. They weren't empty. They weren't lacking anything. They simply existed in a realm where identity didn't need a form. You sensed them as warmth, as softness, as calm resonance, as the way your breathing seemed subtly matched by another rhythm. You sensed them as familiarity without explanation, as nearness without boundary. A face would have limited them. A face would have forced your mind to choose. Friend, stranger, memory, imagination, fear, comfort. And the dream wasn't interested in choices. It was interested in allowing the presence to be everything it needed to be, all at once. Dreams hide faces because faces demand answers, but dreams are not made of answers. They are made of feelings that do not need to be questioned. The presence, in its facelessness, became more than it could have been with features. It was calm without expression. It was gentle without a smile. It was familiar without needing history. It was safe without needing proof. It was close without stepping closer. It was everything a face would have limited, and nothing a face could misunderstand. You sensed all of this intuitively, not in words, not in thoughts, in that drifting internal way where understanding arrives before language forms. Your awareness brushed against the presence and recognized it without needing eyes, the way you can recognize the warmth of sunlight even with your eyes closed. The dream continued to shift softly around you, keeping the space undefined. Undefined so your mind wouldn't attach too strongly to any detail. Undefined so your thoughts wouldn't sharpen. Undefined so you could keep sinking deeper, breath by breath, into the gentle ambiguity where sleep becomes heavier and heavier. The presence remained beside you, a steady, unchanging anchor in a space where nothing else stayed still. Every time your mind floated toward wakefulness, toward clarity, toward the urge to understand, the dream cushioned that instinct with softness. Edges blurred, distances softened, shapes dissolved, and the presence stayed, as calm and unbothered as the silence surrounding you. There was a moment, one you didn't fully register, when you realized that the facelessness of the presence didn't feel like an absence at all. It felt intentional, necessary, almost kind, as though the dream was letting this presence exist in the purest form possible, free from memory, free from interpretation, free from the constraints of who they would have been if your waking mind took control. You understood then, in the way only dreams allow understanding, that faces belong to identity, but this presence belonged to experience. They were not here to be recognized. They were here to be felt, to walk beside you without asking you to categorize them, to quiet your mind by removing everything that could distract you from the companionship they offered. Somewhere in the drifting softness of that moment, you sensed that if the dream had allowed them to have a face, the entire feeling would have changed. Your mind would have sharpened. Your breath would have shifted. A thread of logic would have pulled you upward toward waking, and the dream, with all its quiet intention, didn't want that. Dreams hide faces so you can stay inside them longer. They hide faces so you don't wake too soon. They hide faces because they know the human mind is always trying to understand, and sometimes understanding is what prevents rest. As you drifted deeper that night, the faceless presence felt more real, not less, because it existed outside the demands of identity. It was pure nearness, pure companionship, pure awareness, and that purity made the dream feel safer, calmer, quieter. You didn't miss the face. You didn't wonder what it looked like. You didn't feel deprived of detail. In dreams, the absence of form is not emptiness. It is clarity of another kind. A clarity that tells you exactly what matters. The feeling of not being alone in a place where the world has melted into soft impressions. And so you continued drifting deeper and deeper, with the presence beside you, unseen, undefined, yet unmistakably real, exactly as the dream intended. Because sometimes the things that stay with you the longest are the ones the dream chose not to show. There are moments in dreams that feel less like events and more like echoes, soft impressions that return again and again across different nights, different years, different versions of you. They never come back as memories. They come back as familiarity. And that night, drifting deeper into the dream with the faceless presence beside you, you began to sense something both strange and strangely comforting. This wasn't the first time someone had walked with you in your sleep. You couldn't recall the earlier dreams, not in the way waking memory recalls things. You couldn't pull up images or scenes or sequences. You couldn't remember where you were, what you were doing, or how the dream had formed around you. But you could feel it, feel the faint resonance of all the times this had happened before. Woven into the quietness of the moment, the way a scent can linger in a room long after the person who wore it has left. It wasn't memory, it was recognition. A recognition rooted so deeply in your internal landscape that it bypassed logic entirely. Something in you knew, someone has walked with me in dreams before. The dream didn't need to confirm it with images. It didn't need to show you flashes or scenes or silhouettes. It simply let the awareness settle in your chest like a soft weight, light but undeniable. You didn't remember the dreams themselves, but you remembered the feeling of them, the calmness, the companionship, the quiet rhythm of two presences drifting together through a place that wasn't a place at all. The presence beside you tonight carried that same rhythm, as if they had stepped out of all those forgotten dreams and into this one seamlessly, without introduction, without reappearing, simply continuing. It felt like you had been walking with them for years, without ever consciously noticing, like they had been drifting at the edge of your awareness across dozens of quiet nights, close enough to accompany you, distant enough to avoid waking your mind, like every dream where you sensed someone else but couldn't describe them had been part of this quiet, ongoing companionship. And the more you drifted, the more those half-remembered impressions began to surface, not as memories, but as sensations that belonged somewhere deeper than memory. You felt the echo of a moment when you turned in a dream and felt someone pause beside you, not seen, not heard, but gently present. You felt the echo of a dream where you walked through something fog-like, and the fog thinned a little because someone was walking with you. You felt the echo of a night when you woke with the strange certainty that your dream had included another presence, though you didn't know who or how. All of it came back as a feeling, a soft collection of echoes carried by the presence beside you now. It didn't matter that you couldn't recall details. Dreams aren't made of details. They're made of emotional truths that linger long after imagery dissolves. And the truth that lingered was this: you have not always been alone in the places your mind wanders at night. The presence stayed beside you as you drifted through the dream's soft, shifting atmosphere, not guiding, not following, simply existing alongside you, as if picking up a path you had both walked many times before. There was a gentleness in the way they matched your pace. No urgency, no pressure, no implication that anything was expected of you. Just the quiet reassurance that their nearness was intentional, like they had come into the dream specifically to walk with you. Again, the realization didn't frighten you. It didn't tighten your breath or sharpen your awareness. It softened you further, because there was something deeply comforting in the idea that your dreams had held a quiet companion all this time, someone who moved beside you through the shapeless landscapes of your sleeping mind, someone who understood you without the need for words, someone who never asked to be seen but always remained, not a guardian, not a guide, not a figure with purpose or agenda, just a presence, a companionship made of silence and nearness, something like an old rhythm your dreaming mind had always known. You could feel them remembering too, not through thought, but through the way their presence harmonized with the dream. They fit into the moment effortlessly, as if they had never left, as if every dream you've ever forgotten had been another chapter in a quiet, continuous connection. The dream shifted slightly around the two of you, forming a kind of emotional corridor, not a hallway, not a path, nothing with physical structure, just a gentle narrowing of sensation that felt like direction. It didn't matter where it led. Dreams don't lead to destinations, they lead to moments. And this moment was one of recognition. You felt the presence fall into the same drifting breath as you, the same quiet pace, the same softened state. If dreams had heartbeats, yours would have matched. There was an ease in it that felt ancient, not ancient in years, but ancient in familiarity, like something that had existed long before memory, something that lived in your subconscious the way an instinct does. And in that long, soft drifting, a single truth settled into you so gently you didn't even notice when it became part of your awareness. This presence has been with you in many dreams. You just never stayed long enough to remember. You didn't try to look at them. You didn't try to understand them. You simply let the dream carry both of you deeper. And in that motion, slow, steady, dissolving, you felt the quiet comfort of something that had always been there, walking beside you in the forgotten corners of sleep, returning again tonight as naturally as if it had never left. A presence whose companionship didn't need form and didn't need explanation because it wasn't new. It was remembered, even if you never saw their face, even if you never learned their name, even if you woke in the morning with no images at all. The dream knew, and you felt it. You had walked with them before, and you were walking with them again. There comes a moment in certain dreams when the presence beside you feels so close, so steady, so quietly aligned with your drifting awareness that a part of you begins to wonder what it would be like to see them, not out of fear, not out of suspicion, but out of a soft, instinctive curiosity, the kind that rises only when you already feel safe. And that night, as you moved deeper into the dream's weightless atmosphere, that curiosity surfaced in you like a ripple spreading through still water. It wasn't a question exactly, more like a sensation that formed before language did. If I turned, would I see them? The thought didn't sharpen you. It didn't disturb the dream. It was simply a quiet acknowledgement of the presence that had been walking with you since the dream first formed. Their nearness felt warmer now, more defined, not by shape, but by the steady clarity of companionship, the kind that doesn't need words or explanation to feel real. And something in you, some gentle instinct, drifted toward the idea of looking. Not with your eyes. Eyes don't work the same way in dreams, but with that deeper, quieter sense of attention that dreams use instead. As soon as that impulse formed, the dream reacted. Not abruptly, not defensively, not with any kind of warning. It simply softened. The space around you seemed to blur, as if the dream had inhaled. The edges of sensation dimmed. Everything became quieter, even the quiet. It was the same way fog becomes thicker when you step toward the place where the air looks clearer. The dream thickened gently, as if stepping in front of your curiosity with a calm hand, saying without words, "Not yet, not like this." The presence beside you didn't pull away. They didn't retreat or fade or shift in distance. If anything, they felt even closer, as though the dream had moved them slightly nearer to reassure you. Their nearness was steady, warm in an unexplainable way, something you felt not on your skin, but in the center of your awareness. The dream hid their face because seeing would have changed the dream. Because a face carries too much meaning, too much clarity, too much of the waking world. But the dream wasn't refusing you. It was protecting the softness that let you drift deeper. And yet, for a brief moment, a very brief moment, you felt something like an outline, not a face, not a shape, but the possibility of one. It was like sensing the warmth of a hand before it touches yours. Like hearing someone breathe behind a closed door, like knowing someone is standing just out of sight. A presence with the suggestion of form, not formed, but forming. The dream allowed you to feel that much, no more. Just enough to acknowledge the closeness without waking the mind's sharp instinct to define what it sees. You felt the almost shape of them, the almost weight, the almost turn of their attention toward you, the almost moment where a dream tries to reveal something but stops itself for your sake. It wasn't frustrating, it wasn't confusing, it was gentle, an unfinished face that didn't need completion to feel real. The dream seemed to whisper through the silence. Seeing isn't knowing. Feeling is. And the presence beside you was real, precisely because you felt them, not because the dream showed them. In that soft, quiet moment, the dream became aware of your awareness. You could sense it adjusting, reshaping itself around your subtle desire, creating more distance between you and the waking world, so you wouldn't rise too quickly from the softness it had built. Your curiosity didn't disappear. It simply settled, the way ripples settle back into stillness. You understood, in that dream logic way, where understanding comes without thought, that the presence didn't need a face for you to recognize them, because recognition was already happening, not through sight, but through that quiet, instinctive resonance you'd been feeling since the moment they appeared. And then something shifted, very small, very gentle, but unmistakable. A gesture, or rather, the idea of a gesture. The presence turned toward you, not physically, not visibly, but emotionally. You felt their attention shift, like a soft gravity pulling in your direction. The dream allowed that. But when you tried to meet that attention with your own, the dream dimmed once more, smoothing out any hint of sharpness. You sensed they wanted you to know they had turned, not to reveal themselves, but to acknowledge you. It was a greeting without form, a glance without eyes, a connection without image. They knew you were there. They had always known, and they wanted you to know that they knew. That was the moment, subtle, wordless, but clear, when the dream let you feel the truth. The presence wasn't hiding their face from you. The dream was hiding it for you. Because if you saw them, the dream would become something else, less soft, less drifting, less dream. Faces pull you upward toward waking. Feeling pulls you downward into sleep. So the dream chose feeling, and so did you. The presence didn't mind. In fact, something in the gentle way their attention held yours made you sense that this was exactly the form they preferred. That facelessness was more honest, more comfortable, more in tune with the way dreams understand closeness. And you accepted that without question, without disappointment, without longing for more, because in dreams, the heart sees better than the eyes. You drifted deeper, and the presence drifted with you, still faceless, still warm, still walking in the same quiet rhythm as you. And the almost seen face, that soft, unfinished outline, faded back into the dream's deeper layer, leaving behind not an image, but a calm certainty. You don't need to see them to know they are real. You only need to feel the way they stay. And they stayed, more clearly than any face could have. There is a kind of conversation that lives only in the soft spaces between waking and sleeping. A language without vocabulary. A meeting that asks for nothing but presence. And that night, drifting with the faceless companion at your side, you slipped into exactly that quieter exchange. It began not as words, but as an ease, a slight aligning of inner rhythms, the sense that something inside you opened and the something beside you opened in reply, not through sound but through the way. Attention thinned. Your thoughts ceased their busy mapping, and something larger folded around the pause. And in that fold, the two of you met without needing names. And you felt it like the matching of breath, like the way two people sitting very near each other will, without trying, begin to breathe in a slow, similar pattern. Not because they agreed to, but because the space between them wanted harmony. There were no sentences, no grammar, no questions thrown across an empty room, only a quiet mutual recognition that did not require proof. And within that recognition, your anxieties softened, as if someone had reached in and eased a knot inside your chest, not by force, but by simply being there, by simply keeping still in the same quiet weather as you. And you understood, without thinking, that sometimes understanding arrives before the mind invents words for it, and that the dream had its own form of conversation, designed to soothe rather than to explain. In that exchange, the presence listened in a way that felt like shelter. It did not search for flaws in you or list the reasons you might be restless. It simply folded around whatever small thing you carried that night, an unnamed worry, a little tiredness, a memory half worn at the edges, and held it against a soft interior until the thing had nowhere to bother you from. The dream did not correct or comfort by telling you what you ought to do. It comforted by being a steady point, and that steadiness was its speech. You felt them not as a speaker, but as a calm instrument, an attention tuned to the same slow frequency as yours. And because dreams can make the nonverbal impossible to ignore, you began to sense replies as sensations, a gentle warmth that answered a small edge of loneliness, a quiet settling that answered a stray, restless thought, a faint sense of agreement that answered a question you had not yet formed. These responses arrived like tides, soft, inevitable, and perfectly timed to pull you away from whatever thin wire of wakefulness your mind still held. There was no need to narrate feelings, no pressure to clarify, and so the conversation remained pure. Exchange without transaction, intimacy without obligation. Occasionally, a fragment of something you might call language brushed the edges of the moment. Not words exactly, but the echo of a phrase your heart already knew, like the memory of a lullaby you never learned properly. And when that echo rose, the presence answered with an ease that made your chest unclench. It was not that you were being told anything you had to remember later, only that the dream's companion was reflecting back what your deeper self needed to feel heard. The dream, it seemed, had appointed this presence as a listener for the parts of you that daylight usually ignores, the small private folds of thought and feeling that rarely get consent to speak aloud. This companion attended to those folds with a patience decades long, the kind of patience that does not hurry and therefore does not wake you. You might have felt for an instant the odd temptation to shape the exchange into language, to make the silence into a sentence, to ask who they were or what they wanted. But in the moment, your question never formed fully, because the dream softened that impulse like a hand stroking a restless animal. The impulse dissolved into gratitude instead, a quiet recognition that some truths do not require articulation, and that some company is best when it simply is. There was no urgency to the conversation, no arc that demanded resolution. Instead, it moved in gentleness, rising and falling as breath does, allowing you to release what you had been carrying and receive the gentle reply in equal measure. The cadence of that exchange felt like returning home to the smallest, most private room you keep inside you, where no one else is allowed except what you choose, and the presence was invited not as a guest with questions, but as a neighbor who knows the house and keeps the night watch so you can rest. As the dialogue continued in that borderless way, you found yourself remembering other nights, not as clear images, but as small echoes. Nights when a similar hush had comforted you without claim. Nights where you woke with an odd calm you could not explain, as if the dream had lent you a patch of peace to carry into morning. Tonight's exchange felt like the same quiet work, repeated across time, stitched into a pattern of sleep that your inner life returns to when it needs repair. In the middle of it, you felt the companion reflect a feeling that surprised you, a sense of patient grief or gentle sorrow, not heavy or tragic, but a kind of quiet melancholy that has a soft, useful purpose, to remind you of small losses so they do not accumulate into something that eats at your bones. And the way they reflected it back to you was not to make you relive it, but to set it down beside you, as if saying, without voice, I see this for you. I will hold it so it does not press you down. That small mercy was the heart of the exchange, an attention that behaved like a pillow under the head of your unguarded thought. You learned in the way dreams teach without speech. That companionship does not have to be dramatic to be profound. That the presence beside you could do more good by not doing anything noisy at all. That being met by someone who understood without needing proof is a rare kindness. The conversation never promised revelation or instruction. Its only gift was presence, which in the shape of dreams is the softest, truest form of understanding. As the night deepened and the dream folded around both of you, the communication thinned into a single feeling of being sustained, an awareness that you were not drifting alone, that your small, unspoken needs were seen and met in a quiet registry of tenderness, and that this kind of listening was meant to be private, to be taken into the slow dark where it would do its work without interruption. You did not record any of this in words, and the waking mind would not have been able to translate it fully, but the exchange settled into you the way a good rest settles, slowly, deeply, and without fuss. And when the dream finally let you go a little later, you woke with a residue of calm you could not otherwise explain, a small, stubborn peace that had been sewn into the edges of your night by a conversation that never used a single word. There is a part of the dream most people never notice, a thin and quiet territory that sits between seeing and not seeing, a place your mind slips into when it stops trying to make sense of what stands beside you. It is not a room, not a hallway, not a landscape. It is the soft, unlit space your thoughts move through when they are too tired to form pictures, but still awake enough to feel presence. And tonight, you drift into that space without resistance, as if you've been here many times before, even if memory refuses to name it. In this in-between, everything grows slower than memory, slower than breath. Shapes don't settle into form. They hover in a gentle, undecided state, the way a word feels on your tongue before you say it, or the way a thought lingers before you know what it means. You don't see anything clearly, but nothing feels hidden either. It's a kind of honesty the waking world doesn't allow, the honesty of not needing answers to feel safe. The presence moves with you here, not ahead, not behind, but in a parallel drift. It never sharpens into a figure, never tries to resolve into a face. And the strange thing is that this absence of definition feels more comforting than clarity ever could. There is a softness in not knowing, a lightness in being allowed to sense without naming. You begin to understand that what steadies you in dreams has never been the shape of the companion beside you, but the nearness itself. In this space between seeing and not seeing, details dissolve before they can burden you. You do not have to remember who you were earlier in the dream. You do not have to hold your identity upright. Everything unnecessary loosens and slides quietly out of your hands. Thoughts first, then effort, then the instinct to interpret anything at all. The dream doesn't take these things from you. It simply stops asking you to carry them. You feel the presence lean closer in the gentlest way, not by movement, but by awareness. That soft shift when you realize something is near without needing to look. There is no fear folded into this closeness. The presence remains exactly as it has always been, faceless, patient, unintrusive, a warmth shaped by distance rather than contact. You recognize it not by sight, but by the quiet in your chest, the sense that nothing here will hurt you and nothing will demand more than you can give. There's a moment, or maybe a feeling shaped like a moment, where you consider looking, truly looking, as if turning toward the presence might finally reveal what has stayed just beyond your understanding. But the impulse fades before it fully forms. In this in-between space, wanting to see becomes unnecessary. You realize how heavy that desire was, how much effort it took in previous dreams to chase clarity that only made the moment sharper, brighter, more awake. Here, the dream rewards you for not insisting on definition. The presence remains beside you, stable as breath, constant as the darkness that holds both of you. You sense something like a gesture, not physical, more like intention, a gentle reassurance that you don't have to look, don't have to solve, don't have to grasp at anything. If there is truth here, it is a quiet truth, meant to be felt, not seen. As the drift deepens, your thoughts become softer silhouettes rather than sentences. They rise and fall without landing, as if the mind finally understands that falling apart is not the same as falling down. The presence, still faceless, adapts to this softening. It grows quieter, not smaller, closer, not clearer. Its nearness becomes a kind of slow lull, a rhythm your breath begins to follow, a subtle pulse that makes the edges of waking fray and unravel. You move deeper into the in-between, where time stops behaving like something you must keep up with. Here, moments stretch without snapping, and silence becomes wide enough to rest in. The presence follows this widening, drifting beside you like a familiar exhale. You do not need language here, or orientation, or even memory. You only need the gentle fact of companionship, a companionship made from nearness rather than identity. A thought surfaces, softened by the dream. Perhaps the reason you never see the presence clearly is because your mind understands something your eyes do not. That clarity would break the spell. That seeing would wake you. That a face would anchor you too sharply to meaning, and meaning would pull you back toward the surface where questions live. The presence remains faceless so that you can drift, so that you can surrender without effort. You feel this realization settle through you like warm dusk, not heavy, not startling, just a quiet understanding that arrives without explanation. In this space between seeing and not seeing, you are safe from definition, safe from expectation, safe from yourself. The presence lingers like a shadow without weight, a hush without origin. You do not turn toward it. You do not need to. Everything essential is already here, in the calm that spreads through your ribs, in the softness gathering behind your eyes, in the way thought itself begins to dissolve. You drift a little deeper, and the in-between shifts with you, growing quieter, dimmer, strangely tender, as if the dream is smoothing the path ahead. The presence stays at your side, unchanging and unshaped, holding the silence steady so you can sink into it without hesitation. And as you begin to descend toward the next layer of night, the one waiting in Chapter 8, where thought becomes texture and identity softens even further, you understand something simple and soothing. You were never meant to see the presence. You were only meant to feel that you were never alone. And with that realization, the in-between dims into a deeper softness, gently passing you forward into the next part of the dream. There are moments in dreams when something rises inside you that feels like memory, but not the kind you lived through in daylight, not the kind attached to childhood or places or people you once knew. It feels older than that, softer, less defined, like a memory borrowed from somewhere else. And as you drifted further into the dream with the silent companion beside you, you felt one of those unfamiliar memories begin to surface, slowly, like a dim shape, lifting out of deep water, not coming towards you, but simply revealing that it had always been there. You didn't see images because the dream wasn't offering images. It was offering feeling, the emotional residue of something that seemed to belong to another life, or another version of you, or another dream entirely. It settled into you with a strange ease, as if the memory recognized you even if you didn't recognize it. This wasn't frightening. It didn't pry or insist or overwhelm. It felt like the soft arrival of déjà vu without the confusion, an inner familiarity that asked for nothing and explained nothing, a gentle brushing of something that had waited patiently in the deeper rooms of your mind. You felt the presence beside you shift, not physically, but in that subtle inner way that indicated they, too, sensed the memory rising. They didn't move away. They didn't intervene. They simply widened their attention, like opening their hands to receive something fragile. The dream's air changed slightly, thickening in the quiet way it does when it wants you to look inward rather than outward. You didn't try to name the memory. Dreams don't like being named. Instead, you let it hover, a soft echo filling the space between you and the presence walking at your side. You felt for a moment the faint impression of walking somewhere with someone, not this presence, but someone from a different time or a different dream. There was warmth there, a familiar closeness, but when you tried to follow it, the dream blurred the edges until only the feeling remained, a feeling of having once stood in a moment that mattered, a moment that shaped you in a way you never consciously remembered. The presence beside you reacted, not by clarifying it, but by grounding you, their steady nearness reminding you that even if this memory wasn't yours, the experience of receiving it was. Dreams can lend you memories the way rivers lend reflections, briefly, softly, without claiming they are real, only that they are meaningful. The presence lets you feel that meaning without trying to define it, and in their calm attention, you sensed a kind of understanding that not every memory you carry must come from your waking life. Some belong to the dream world itself. The memory deepened, not into imagery, but into sensation, thick and warm. You felt the impression of hands, not touching you, not reaching for you, but existing near you in some earlier moment you couldn't fully recall. A gesture of someone turning towards you, a breath shared, a sense of being recognized by someone whose face never held still long enough to be remembered. It wasn't sorrowful. It wasn't joyful. It was something in between, a quiet, emotional tone that made your chest feel full, like the memory carried its own weather. And the strangest part was that it didn't feel foreign. It felt like a dream you had lived a long time ago, long enough for every detail to dissolve except the emotional residue. You felt the presence beside you echo that residue, not copying it, but resonating with it, like two tuning forks vibrating at the same pitch. Their silent companionship made it easier to hold the memory without needing to understand it. Dreams often give you things you're not meant to think through, only to sit with, the way one sits with a warm cup in cold hands. The more the memory lingered, the more you realized it wasn't trying to tell you a story. It was trying to tell you a truth, one that couldn't be spoken or shown or reasoned with. The truth that not everything forming you belongs to your waking past. That some parts of you were shaped by nights you never remembered, by dreams you drifted through half asleep, by presences you walked beside without ever seeing their faces. You sensed all of this in a way that bypassed thought entirely, settling directly into the place inside you where dreams and intuition blur together. The presence beside you felt it too. You sensed their quiet recognition, like they were remembering something alongside you. Not the same memory, but the same kind of memory. The same soft echo from a place neither of you needed to define. And then the memory began to fade, not out of loss, but out of completion. It had shown you what it came to show, not an image, not an event, but a feeling that had waited a long time to return. The fading didn't feel like something slipping away. It felt like something sighing, settling back into the deeper layer where dreams keep their oldest truths. You didn't chase it. You didn't hold on to it. You let it go the way the tide lets go of the shore, trusting that it would return one night in some other form, or perhaps never return at all, because its purpose was already fulfilled. The presence beside you stayed steady, their nearness quieting any lingering tension the memory left behind. They felt closer now, not because they had moved, but because the dream had thinned the space between you in response to your openness. There was a moment, a soft one, where you felt as if you and the presence had shared something. Not a memory exactly, but an understanding that only existed because the dream allowed you both to witness the echo of something half forgotten. Dreams, after all, are not linear. They don't care what belongs to whom, they only care what your heart recognizes. And as you walked deeper into the dream, letting the memory that wasn't yours dissolve back into the quiet, you felt a gentle awareness settle over you, an awareness that the dream, the presence, and you were all participating in something older than definition, something that wasn't bound to the world you wake up to, something that didn't need to be true to be real. The presence didn't need to speak to tell you this. Their silence was enough. Their steadiness was enough. Their company was enough. And the memory, though it vanished, left a warmth behind, a subtle imprint, a residue of connection, a soft truth without a name, reminding you that the dream world carries parts of you that your waking mind has never learned to remember. There is a quiet, uncanny moment in some dreams when you stop trying to understand and simply notice. And tonight, Walking in that soft, formless place with the faceless companion at your side, you reach exactly that moment. Not a revelation like a thunderclap, not a sudden flash that answers every question, just a steady, intimate recognition that is less about knowledge and more about being known. It arrives slowly, like light at the edge of dawn, where you cannot yet name the shapes it favors, but you feel warmth that was not there a breath before. And as you drift, the awareness unfurls in you. This presence beside you does not merely accompany you, it remembers the cadence of your small, unspoken things. At first, you sense it indirectly, a shift in the dream's tone when some private worry brushes your mind, a soft settling that follows when an old ache loosens, a faint brightening at the edges of a thought that was about to become sharp. And you notice that each time something stirs inside you, the presence answers with a kind of knowing so precise it feels as if they have cataloged your inner weather across many nights. It is not intrusive knowledge. It is not the knowing of a spy or a judge or a stranger who claims to see you because they choose to. It is the patient, effortless knowledge of something that has walked beside you long enough to sync with the rhythm of your breath. In the dream, this realization does not begin with names or faces. It begins with small harmonies. Your breathing eases and theirs eases at the same cadence. Your step, such as it is in a place without firm ground, finds a counterpoint in a presence that pauses and accelerates with you as though two halves of the same thought were pacing. A worry you had not allowed yourself to feel loosens when it senses that somebody else is keeping watch, and the relief is immediate, wordless, unmanufactured. You find, without force, that you can let go of certain defenses you would normally carry into sleep, those tidy narratives the waking mind likes to file away, and the presence receives what you release without comment or judgment, not cataloging it as evidence, but holding it like a warm stone you can set down. It is in these exchanges that the most intimate truth reveals itself. They know the shape of you that your daylight self rarely sees. The thin, quiet fractures and the tiny, bright seams, the habitual, small sorrows and the honest, ridiculous comforts you never mention aloud. And they know how to meet each with gentleness rather than analysis. The recognition is humbling, not because you feel exposed, but because you are understood without having to explain yourself. It is letting someone see the inside of you and answer with something softer than explanation. This kind of knowing changes the texture of the dream. What was previously a moving, neutral space becomes a sheltered passage, a place that anticipates your needs before you name them. You are not surprised by this intimacy. You are quietly grateful for it, and gratitude in dreams is a feeling that makes the atmosphere breathe a mite deeper, that tugs at the edges of sleep like a low, comforting tide. There is an odd, almost tender precision in the way the presence meets your small moments. When your mind flirts with a memory that is not yet ready to be felt, their stillness holds you steady. When a flash of loneliness brushes past, their nearness fills the soft vacancy as if laying down a patch of warmth. When restlessness stirs, their silent pacing matches it until it settles. You realize, too, that this knowledge is not merely of events, but of pattern, an attention to the ways your attention shifts, the gentle inclinations of your heart, the private rhythms you think nobody sees. And because the knowing is pattern-based rather than fact-based, it does not require a face or a name. It is built from the architecture of noticing rather than the architecture of identity. In that recognition, there is a kind of safety you have rarely felt in waking life. Not the brittle safety of rules or promises, but the deeper safety of being accompanied by a presence that does not ask you to be anything other than what you are in the quietest hours. For a moment, you feel almost silly, as if a childlike relief washes through you. Small worries lose their gravity simply because someone else understands their weight. And dreams are generous in this way. They allow such mercies without ceremony, because ceremonies wake you. So the companion's knowing remains unspoken, unannounced, but palpable, and you begin to trust it not because you have evidence, but because trust here grows out of repeated small mercies, the kind that accumulate while you sleep. There may come a temptation in any mind to test such companionship, to nudge the dream, prod the presence, ask for proof. Yet the dream gently discourages that impulse by being tenderly protective of its own logic. When you think toward testing, the dream blurs slightly, easing the urge into a cloud that passes without consequence, and you learn not to demand the satisfaction of the waking world from the night's company. Instead, you offer the quiet gift the dream asks for: attention without interrogation, the practice of receiving another's care without translating it into need or return. In doing so, the realization deepens. You are known in ways that matter, and being known so gently changes the ground beneath your inner feet. It makes the edges of worry less sharp, the pace of thought less hurried, the small fixation you carried into sleep shrink in its own light. And the more you acclimate to this knowledge, the more the dream itself relaxes into a single, sustained hush, an expanse of tacit companionship where being matched in pace, in breath, in feeling, is the only narrative required. You notice, too, that this knowledge is reciprocal. You come to understand them in return, not through recognition of face or name, but through understanding of rhythm and intention, the sense that they are not only acquainted with your unrest, but willing to bear a share of it for the night. That reciprocity makes the dream feel less like a solitary architecture of private images and more like a shared living place with two hearts in slow conversation. As the awareness settles fully into you, the dream carries both of you further down the soft slope of sleep, and the realization remains. Being known without spectacle is among the gentlest of things, and perhaps the truest kindness dreams offer. There comes a point in certain dreams where the drifting stops feeling like movement and starts feeling like surrender. Not a surrender of control, but a surrender of weight, as if the parts of you that usually hold everything upright simply decide they no longer need to. And as you move deeper into the night with the familiar faceless presence beside you, you sense the dream reaching this quiet threshold, the place where the dream no longer needs to teach or reveal or echo anything back to you, and instead begins the slow, careful work of letting you rest. It begins subtly, the way dusk transitions into night, without your noticing the exact moment the sky loses its last blue. The atmosphere around you thickens. The soft groundlessness beneath your awareness becomes gentler, and the presence beside you shifts, not away, not closer, but into a state that feels less like motion and more like keeping watch. You feel the change not through sight, but through sensation. A slow warmth settling at the edges of your awareness, the faint quiet that enters your thoughts when nothing more is required of you, the softened gravity that pulls you inward rather than forward. It is the dream saying, without language, you have wandered enough for now. Drift. I will hold the rest. You weren't tired before, not in the way the waking body is tired, but you feel tiredness now, a good tiredness, the kind that loosens the small muscles of thought, the kind that hums gently through your inner world like a distant lullaby. The presence beside you mirrors that tiredness in a way that feels deliberate. Their rhythm slows to match yours. Their nearness steadies itself as if making sure nothing startles you in this descent. Dreams can be unpredictable, but this one is not. This dream has decided its purpose, and its purpose is to give you a place to rest without questions, without interpretation, without the pressure to understand the strange moments that brought you here. Everything that needed to unfold has already unfolded. Everything left is softness. You feel the dream dim its own edges, as if pulling curtains around the space you occupy. The vague shapes and half-formed sensations that once drifted past in slow motion now quiet themselves, not fading entirely, but becoming distant, like sounds heard through a closed door. Even your thoughts begin to stretch out, long and slow, no longer forming in sharp bursts, but drifting into one another like threads being woven into a single, steady fabric. The presence doesn't speak, it never speaks, but its silence now feels different, heavier in a comforting way, like the quiet of someone sitting beside your bed when you're too tired to lift your head. They are fully here, fully attentive, yet requiring nothing from you. The dream itself seems to acknowledge this shift, the way a room grows still when someone finally closes their eyes. And as this stillness settles, you notice something gentle rising within you, the sense that you don't have to hold yourself together in this place. You don't have to keep track of anything. You don't have to remember. You don't have to make sense of the presence or the path or the odd familiarity woven through every part of the night. You can let all of it loosen. The dream won't let anything fall apart. The presence won't let anything be lost. There is a trust here that didn't exist at the beginning, not because the dream changed, but because you did. Your guard lowered, your attention softened. You surrendered enough for the dream to show you its gentlest form. As you drift even deeper, something inside you begins to unravel, not painfully, not dramatically, but quietly, like a tightly woven cloth slowly letting go of its tension. The presence senses this, adjusting the atmosphere around you to cushion the unraveling, making the air feel warmer, the darkness feel friendlier, the silence feel like a blanket rather than a void. This is the moment the dream has been leading you toward, the moment where thinking becomes optional, where being becomes enough, where rest is no longer something you try to reach, but something that reaches you. You can feel the presence watching over you now, not in a way that implies worry or vigilance, but in a way that suggests they have done this before many times, just beyond the edge of dreams you never remembered. The dream thickens around both of you, becoming a softer place, a quieter place, a kind of sheltered hollow carved out for the specific purpose of letting you release the last threads of wakefulness. And as your mind loosens its grip on awareness, the presence shifts into a new kind of stillness, the stillness of someone who knows that the next part of the journey isn't walking or wandering or understanding, but simply resting. They are no longer beside you as a companion on a path. That part is finished. They are beside you as a quiet guardian of the space you are falling into. For a brief moment, you become aware of how rare this feeling is, to rest without needing to earn it, to let go without being asked to explain why you held on so tightly in the first place. The dream does not judge the tiredness in you. It treats your exhaustion as something natural, expected, ordinary, as if everyone who enters this place arrives carrying something that needs softening. And because this tender acceptance wraps around you without condition, your inner world finally unclenches. Your thoughts slow, your breath deepens. Your awareness drifts toward the softest layer of sleep. And in that final drift, you feel the presence lean, not physically, but in intention, closer to you. It is not a gesture of affection or urgency. It is a gesture of assurance, the quiet promise that they will stay until the dream has fully delivered you into rest. They do not need to speak this promise. You feel it in the air around you, in the slow, calming pull of the dream's gravity, in the way the world narrows not to trap you, but to cradle you. The dream is no longer a place. It is a nest, a soft enclosure, a quiet arrangement of safety and darkness and warmth. And the presence, the one who has walked with you through silence and facelessness and wordless recognition, remains at the edge of your consciousness as the last part of you relaxes, as the drift takes over, as thinking dissolves, as rest finally arrives without effort. You don't remember falling asleep inside a dream. No one ever does. But this is what it feels like in the moment before you do. There is a particular depth in sleep where dreams stop behaving like stories and begin behaving like tides, slow, unhurried, rising and falling without intention. And as you sink toward that depth with the familiar faceless presence, lingering somewhere just behind your awareness, you feel the dream loosen its own structure, softening everything it once held together so carefully, letting shapes drift apart, letting emotions thin out, letting thoughts dissolve until they no longer have enough weight to form edges. At first, you notice it in the air around you, how it becomes quieter than quiet, the kind of quiet that feels thick and warm, like a blanket woven from nothing but breath and darkness. And then you notice it inside you, how your thoughts stretch into long, gentle strands instead of flickering like restless flame, how the need to understand anything fades, the way sound fades underwater, how the dream no longer needs you to walk or witness or feel anything specific, because now its only purpose is to let you fall softly into the silence that waits beneath all dreams. The presence is still here, that much you can sense, but their nearness has shifted again, becoming more diffused, less like a figure and more like a low glow, a kind of warmth at the farthest edge of your mind that holds its place the way a lighthouse holds its light, even when you can no longer see the structure around it. They are not guiding now. They are not mirroring your emotions. They are simply remaining a quiet constant as the dream unribbons itself around you. Even their silence has changed. Earlier, it was a shared silence, something both of you occupied together, but now it feels like a silence meant for you alone, a silence they have stepped back from just enough to give you room to sink deeper without feeling watched or needed. Dreams know when to let go, and this one is letting go with exquisite gentleness. You begin to feel weightless, not in the floating way of earlier dreams, but in a way that resembles sinking through warm darkness, sinking without falling, sinking without fear. It is the kind of weightlessness that feels earned, the kind that comes only when the mind has released everything it secretly clung to, everything it didn't realize it carried into sleep. Your breath slows, not because you try to slow it, but because the dream slows it for you, matching it to the rhythm found in deep rest, the rhythm where every inhale is long and soft, and every exhale is longer still, trailing off like a ribbon drifting in water. The presence senses this shift, and though they do not move, you feel their awareness widen, as if they are making space for the part of you that is descending into darker, softer territory. The dream dims further, smoothing out any remaining texture in the space around you. Whatever impressions existed, vague outlines, distant echoes, drifting shapes, they all flatten into a single, velvety darkness that feels neither empty nor infinite, only gentle. In this darkness, nothing is expected of you. There is no direction to move toward, no emotion to hold, no remainder of story to follow. You feel the quiet like a physical thing now, pressing softly against the inside of your mind, asking nothing, offering everything. This is the silence that comes only after the dream has finished speaking. This is the silence where the mind begins to repair itself. This is the silence that feels like returning to a place you've never seen but somehow recognize. And then something inside you shifts, so subtle you almost miss it. It is not a thought. It is not an emotion. It is more like a loosening, as if the last thread of wakefulness releases its grip on you. The presence, still patient, still warm, acknowledges it with the faintest ripple of attention, not enough to disturb you, just enough to steady the descent. They remain at the periphery, neither approaching nor withdrawing, simply witnessing the final stage of your drift. It feels like someone dimming the last lamp in a quiet room while making sure their footsteps make no sound on the floorboards. You may sense for a breath or two the peculiar feeling of being between states, no longer fully in the dream, not yet fully in the depth beneath it. It is a soft, liminal place where awareness thins into something almost translucent. The presence holds that threshold for you, keeping it safe, keeping it steady, ensuring you do not rise too quickly or fall too sharply. There is no urgency, no movement, only the slow, unbroken slide into restful darkness. And as you move deeper, the dream begins to retreat, not abruptly, not like a door closing, but like fog gently pulling away from your skin. It gives you space. It gives you stillness. It gives you the quiet required to let the last of your thoughts dissolve. The presence recedes slightly too, but not in loss. It is the kind of retreat that implies trust, the kind that happens when someone knows you no longer need the reassurance of closeness because your descent is steady and sure. Yet even as they retreat, you can still sense them, a faint hum at the edge of the silence, a guardian presence making sure the darkness stays soft. This is the moment where language stops being useful. This is the moment where your thoughts fade into the quiet, and you let them. You let the entire night wrap around you like a slow, deep breath. You let the dream loosen its hold. You let the presence watch over the parts of you that remain. You let yourself become nothing but softness, sinking into darkness that has no depth because depth is no longer something you measure. This is what it feels like when the dream prepares you for the final descent. Not with images, not with stories, just with silence. The softest silence you have ever felt, holding you exactly where you need to be, carrying you the rest of the way without requiring you to stay awake for any part of it. And slowly, gently, effortlessly, you dissolve into it, into the quiet, into the looseness, into the dim warmth that has been waiting for you from the very beginning. There is a finalness to certain nights that does not feel like ending, only like soft arranging, like the night folding your tiredness into something it can hold for you. The presence beside you settles into a quieter shape, not leaving, not approaching, simply becoming the kind of nearness that asks nothing of you, the kind that lets your breath lengthen without your noticing. In these last moments, the dream does not try to show you anything more. It softens all remaining detail, reduces everything to the faintest impressions. Weight, warmth, the hush of dark air resting against your skin, as if even the imagery has grown sleepy and no longer wants to stay awake. Nothing disturbs you now. Nothing tugs at the edges of your mind. Everything loosens in a gentle chain. The thoughts, the little tensions, the reasons you thought you had to stay alert, each one unfastening itself in its own time. The presence watches all of this with the calm patience of someone who has seen many nights like this. Someone who knows exactly how slowly the mind relaxes when it finally decides it no longer needs to hold itself together. You let go of the gratitude rising in your chest, letting it drift the way a leaf drifts on still water, because even gratitude is too heavy to carry any further. Breath becomes simple, a slow gathering, a slower release. Every exhale lowers you another inch into the dark that waits below thinking. There is a tiny easing in your jaw, a soft unwinding behind your eyes, a gentle loosening deep in the center of your chest. These are the signs the dream has been waiting for, the small permissions your body gives itself when it knows it is safe. You do not hold on to identity here. You do not need to. Whatever you brought with you, the worries, the noise, the names, the dream takes them not as burdens, but as things ready to fade. It smooths them out, makes them quiet, makes them distant, until they lose all shape. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the outer layer of the dream thins, leaving only the softest part of the night around you. Thoughts no longer try to form sentences. They stretch, blur, dissolve into something warm and formless. Sensation narrows to a few simple truths: the weight of your body, the warmth beneath your skin, and the calm recognition that you are held. And in that deepest quiet, the one beneath every other quiet, you feel the presence step back into the darkness that shaped it, not as departure, but as guardianship from farther away. Something settles over you then, a truth without words. You are safe now. You can rest now. The night will hold you all the way down. Nothing follows you into this place. Nothing waits for you to wake. Nothing asks anything more of you. There is only darkness, steady and patient, and the sense of a companion fading into a soft outline. Still here, still watching, making sure the world stays gentle as you drift the last few inches into sleep. And as you drift, slowly, completely, the dream folds around you with its final promise. You are not alone in the places your mind wanders. Not tonight. Not ever. And the quiet deepens, the darkness softens, and you disappear into a rest that asks for nothing but your breath and your surrender.